Hi there, good afternoon. It's Jill Tiney with Erkan Ali and Joe Kay, here to talk on the BeCollaboration podcast, Journey of Possibility. You make me laugh every time I do
really well.
Until you looked at me, yeah.
So
Welcome.
we'll see you after the music. Bye. We're back.
Hey.
So,
welcome, Joe.
You're brave.
Thank
Lovely
you.
to have you
You're
here
brave.
today.
Come in here on a hot day like this.
Very
With the lights.
You know,
So, yeah, just to let everyone know, today is like, I mean, what, 26,
Gorgeous.
27
Yeah.
out there?
Yeah,
It's
out there.
really lovely.
we
It's really
contemplated going out in the garden to do the podcast. It was too warm, which is
Yeah.
really nice. Is he making you feel a bit inferior? I'm just sitting in all these guns out.
Yeah, but I have the wisdom of the age. That's all I've got.
That's
It's like
true.
clutching on straws. Yeah, you know, hey, look at these guns. Yeah, but I've been around the block.
So are you a workout merchant?
I do like to do a bit of sort of healthy mind, healthy body. I find that if I don't go and do something,
Yeah.
a couple of times a week at least, I just sort of energy goes down.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's just I've got a bit of a theory that if you sort of do sports and keeps the blood going fast around your head as well. So
hopefully it rejuvenates a few.
yeah,
grey.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. A bit of grey matter. Oh, I do quite often come up with ideas in the gym, I suppose.
It's funny, isn't it? As
Yeah.
soon as you get away from the space that you're supposed to be working,
Yeah.
you can create more. So
Yeah.
when people say to me with my clients, it's like, oh, I haven't had a holiday for 3 years. I'm like, are you crazy?
Yeah.
That's the best
Oh,
time
yeah.
when you can, you've left everything behind, and that's when you have these epiphanies.
I'll
Of like,
fill up a whole notebook
yes.
on holiday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a different. It's a different. But before we get into all that,
Yeah.
so welcome. Well, first of all, welcome to BeCollaboration.
Thank you.
Because you,
Yeah.
I think, are probably the newest member we've had on the podcast.
Ah, I
yes,
feel
I think
honoured.
so, yeah.
Because you're not even a month in, are you?
No, been to one meeting.
One meeting, and that was actually, I've got to tell you, one of the best ones we've had. So all the rest will be rubbish.
Oh, so
Had a few good
we want my
ones.
money back.
we got you in on a
Those
thing.
pretenses.
It's
But
always as good as this.
But I mean, to come out of the, if you like, the normal world, so to speak,
Yeah.
to a BeCollaboration meeting. I mean, you seem, you come in as someone, I don't know, and you just went with everything.
Yeah.
You just seemed like you felt very comfortable. Is that because you're like that normally, or is that just you found that the space was quite inviting?
Well, I think at one point we were doing some dancing. I wasn't massively comfortable with that, if I'm honest. But I kind of go with the flow, don't you?
Yeah,
I don't want to be the guy not doing it.
yeah, absolutely.
And the conversation was great, so
Yeah.
really enjoyed it.
So what was your perception of what BeColl was, and then what did it turn into, and why? And maybe why did you get involved? Why did you go? Yeah, I mean, because one of the things is that people who get involved with BeCollaboration, we've always made it that you choose to be part of it. No one's closed you. No one said you should. It's a bit like here we presented it, and then you go, yeah, I want to be part of this, or no, you don't.
Well, I mean, the first time I met you guys very briefly was a couple of years ago, and in Newbury, and I liked the idea then, and then I've been off doing my thing, and hadn't really sort of thought about it again too much until Jill got back in touch, and I thought, I liked it the first time, and I thought, well, why not give it a go? And thought it was great. So didn't really come with any sort of preconceived ideas or pretenses. I'm big into the idea of sort of getting diverse groups of people together and thinking together and just sort of bouncing off each other, a little bit like taking a step back, going to the gym, going on holiday.
Yeah.
That's when you actually you get some of that perspective and some you come up with the best stuff. So it's a whole group of people doing that from what I saw, so thought, why not?
Yeah, I mean, quite often collaborators will say it's the one time in the month I can just get away from it all and be in a different space, in a kind of more exploratory space, a more considered space, and have that bit of indulgence in the month, like where you can do that. So well done. Thank you for jumping in.
Yeah.
So you've had an interesting background, haven't you? So I know you live in Reading, but is that where you grew up?
Just outside. I grew up in Maidenhead, so not a million miles away from it. Always sort of that area, but then went away to university and then joined the army. So then spent sort of 11 years.
Travelled the world.
Yeah, well, yeah, I did 3 years. 3 years attached to the US Army as well. So I was living in America for 3 years, but then I joined the army 2 days before September the 11th.
Wow.
And then did lots of operational tours in my 11 years, and saw all of the nicest places on the planet.
So if you're in the US Army, is it true that it's the same language divided? Was it very different from the UK?
From a language perspective, or from a culture perspective?
Culture.
The culture is different. There's we could fill a podcast with similarities and differences. Overall, the two military cultures are fairly similar, but then they're similar enough that you'll get drawn into a false sense of security, and you think, oh, it's exactly the same, and then it is very different. There are some funny things that the Americans do that, from my perspective, and then I'm sure they would look at the British Army and think, that's crazy. Yeah. But by and large, it's fairly similar.
So did you go into it as a career, or did you go into it because, did you have a dream to be in the army when you were a kid? Was it something that...
I suppose I did. It wasn't sort of... all I ever wanted to do was be in the army. It wasn't like a vocation. I thought I would explore it. I did explore it in my sort of teenage years, and I actually went into for some selection tests, and they said, you don't really know anything about the army, so join the officer training corps when you're at university, find out about it, and then come back. And I joined the officer training corps at university, loved it, and then went back and said, well, a couple of years ago you said to come back, here I am, and then sort of whizzed through all of the... So
you never did the sort of territorial army or any of that?
No, only university. I didn't do cadets, didn't do the territorial army before university, and then did.
You were in.
Then I was in. And to your question about was it a career? I said I'd stay in while I was enjoying it.
Right.
And I had an amazing 11 years, but the weird timing that I joined, you go to Sandhurst 2 days later, the Twin Towers have come down, and before then it was all sort of about peacekeeping, and even we watched the second plane come in, and of course they wheeled in. We were on sort of like first week of Sandhurst. It was like lockdown, no TV. They wheeled a TV in and said like this big event is happening. And we thought, some of us were thinking,
training exercise.
We're training, and no, it wasn't obviously. And our colour sergeant, who was training us in that first bit, said, guys, we're all going to go to war. This is massive. And of course, then we sort of did, of multiple tours of Iraq and Afghanistan later. But so in a weird way, I felt that I sort of scratched that itch to a certain extent. Like I'd gone and experienced what my perception of joining the army was all about, and then but within my 11 years, I think I totaled it up that I spent 3 years of that on operations, which is if I'd have joined 20 years ago and done 11 years, I wouldn't have had any of that. So I had a really good experience, wouldn't change anything, but then I had sort of, I came up with a bright idea and a new challenge, and I so wouldn't change anything, but it was the right time for me to leave. Other people have a vocation about it.
Yeah, I get that.
Like teaching or nursing or medicine,
and some people just haven't got a clue. And I mean, I remember one of my daughter's friends. He was doing internships in all different places, and he went to an accountancy firm, and he went with the. He was a history degree that he'd done. So while he was into accountancy, I might do that. And it's no, I'll join the Navy. I was like, everyone kind of like, where did that come from? It's just, but he loves it, absolutely loves it. Yeah. So I've got to ask the question. 2 days before 9/11, what was the feeling? As we know now, and we talk about it quite easily. It's an inside job. What was what do you feel about that now?
Whether 9/11 was some form of conspiracy? I don't think it is.
Okay.
Having been involved in I suppose, government and being on sort of the inside, I was never ever, I saw no conspiracies at all about anything. It was more just people genuinely just trying to sort of do the best they can. I mean, maybe I'm just being naive about that and just being part of the system, but I just don't buy into any of the conspiracy stuff. Sorry.
No, so I'm just asking the question. I was just wondering, because from the inside looking out, you're in it, and I wonder, sometimes you see things that are going on, it's like, oh, our boys are going over to this place to, drop some more bombs, and you think, do they feel like they're pawns in a big game?
Oh, okay, so that's a little bit different. I mean, do I feel like, with the benefit of hindsight, we should have necessarily gone to Iraq or Afghanistan? Probably not. No. With hindsight, but it's a great example. I signed up, and then 2 days later, the situation's changed. And ultimately, when you sign up into the military, you give up your choice. You rely on the politicians to say you go over there, and it's not your job then to say, I don't know about that.
Hang on a minute.
If you want to be the one making those decisions, you go into politics. So we did what we were told, and so maybe not the reasons for being in Iraq or Afghanistan were the best ones, but how we behaved while we were there, we can only do that to our best possible, in the best possible way we can.
Takes over, isn't it?
Well, it's we just try and do the best job we can in the situation that we find ourselves in, but there wasn't a big within the military. There's got to be, if politicians send the military, there should be some strategic end state that we're trying to achieve. And when the military don't have that, it's very difficult to just go over there and do something. That's really difficult to do. So then you end up, people do the best they can, but there's nothing really to achieve.
Yeah, what's the end goal?
If there is no big end goal, and there really wasn't in Iraq or Afghanistan, and you end up just creating more problems. But that's with, when I was in, I didn't really think like that. Stepping outside with the benefit of hindsight, marginally frustrating, but then actually...
So it's a bit like being in a cult. When you're in it, you don't realise it's that bad, and then when you come out, you go,
it wasn't.
It wasn't bad, but do you know what I mean?
It's not bad. You don't like to. I know people did ask me at the time, well, what do you think about it? And I said, well, I haven't got that luxury.
Yeah.
If I'm sitting in Afghanistan for a year with the US Army, if I start thinking to myself, oh, why are we even here? That's a recipe for depression. And because you're not going to not be allowed to be there, so you don't think like that. You make the best of it.
I've been very quiet.
That's unusual.
Shock horror.
I mean, I've only just met you, but I know
you
that.
know already.
So I'm really gauging where I want to enter this conversation, because you've said a whole load of things that I'm like, oh dear, right? And I'm being really straight. I'm not that too. And I want to learn from this experience, because and I think it's really important that our audience get the maximum value, because if you like where you're coming from, I'd say during your service, I'm probably on the complete opposite side of the spectrum. So if you said to me I had to enlist, I would have never done it. I've been kind of militant my whole life. I've never really, in fact, our new consultancy's got quite a provocative name because of my teachers used to call me Gaddafi at school. Right. Also, having a background that's linked to Turkey and Cyprus and the Muslim world gives me a completely different insight to some young English guy growing up in Maidenhead. Completely. And I don't mean just because my background is there. I think some of my life experiences took me through Europe. I got to see people. And I had uncles and cousins that were in the army during the war in '74. My uncle was a commander. So to mitigate that, and I think there were some things you said there that actually kind of really struck a chord with me, because I think there's two major cults there are on the planet at the moment. One is the money cult, how obsessed we are with money, getting money, looking at money as a way of survival and the whole way that money's controlled. Something we talk a lot about in the Be Inspired programme, how money's created, how it comes about. The other cult that I think has really got a grip on us as individuals, as a species, as a race, if you like, is the cult of statism. You know, this national state and our obedience and complicitness with the state's wishes. And I think for me, the army, the police, probably the navy, any of the major services, there is this thing about, I'm not here to ask questions. I'm not, because if I start asking questions, it's going to not go well. And I think a lot of schooling is not about asking questions. Is learn what we've taught you, repeat it, and then you go to the next stage. Learn what we've taught you, repeat it. So part of the statism requirement is obedience. Is to do what you're told to do. Don't just step out of line, right? I couldn't think of probably anywhere that's more the case than probably the army for many reasons.
I would say that there's a common misconception with the army that you're just some sort of drone. Actually, you're given, particularly as an officer, you're given quite a lot of responsibility and ability to be able to innovate, and
within the mission.
Within the mission.
But the mission's set by.
Yeah.
You know, so what I'm getting at is, we say the politicians.
Yeah.
You know, I think you said the politicians send us.
Yeah.
But we know, and this isn't. I think conspiracy theory has had a lot of work done on that term, you know, and the first time it was used back after the Kennedy assassination, around subverting the term conspiracy theorist and ridiculing it. Because if you don't buy, so I say to people, everyone's a conspiracy theorist, aren't they? They go, why don't? Well, unless you buy the official line, hook, line and sinker, you obviously think something else might have happened. They're not going to give you openly the actual what's going on, because we don't live in that kind of society. Yeah. So ergo, we all got to go, well, there's something more to this than is being presented. But what's going on is a matter of, well, there's disinformation, there's different vested interests, it's very complex now with social media and, you know.
So now social media, that's an interesting bit though, and this is why I think that, you know, out of your two cults of money and statism, you know, statism is a particular problem at the moment because we're actually aware now about what different states are doing and what they stand for in a way that we just weren't at all. You know, we talk about the global village, but I mean, even when I'm 38. When I was a kid, we had no idea what was going on in different parts of the world, and therefore didn't really matter. I wasn't particularly, I was living in my little bubble, and everyone's living in their little bubbles. You know, now we've got the internet and the web, we're suddenly all aware of, actually, and so actually, you know, the way I look at it there, if you zoom out at sort of real macro level, we're in, and if we could project ourselves sort of 500 years in the future and we look back and say, oh yeah, well, it's not a surprise, it's kind of the equivalent of, here are a whole load of tribes and they've all just met each other and they've all got radically different ideas of like what God is, what's right, what's wrong,
what's holy and respected, and what's, you know, that's not valued, whatever. Yeah, absolutely.
And because of the way, like our evolution, we've evolved to trust our own tribes and not the next tribe in the next valley, and over millions of years, because that kept us safe. And so when you scale it out and look at what the web's done to us, there's no big surprise that sort of, you know, suddenly you've got a whole, you know, a lot of the Islamic world is sort of offended by Western society, and, you know, whatever state is, you know, we'll think we're right. Again, I think but we're just offended.
Yeah, I think at the level of nationalism, yes.
Yeah.
Because I grew up, my dad was a staunch nationalist. You know, you're Turkish, your blood's Turkish, you bleed Turkish. I'm not nothing so positive. You know, it's like I didn't buy. See, as a kid, I never bought into any of that. So I'm not anti.
But you must have been an outlier for
you have no idea. Right? So I'll give you a little example. I may have repeated this on a podcast, but I don't know when. But so when I was like 11, 12, 13, we'd go to Turkey, and we've always had we're not Turkish, we're Turkish Cypriot. But we have always had a home in Turkey.
That sounds very specific and state-like.
Oh yeah.
Well, it's not only that.
It's
Well, I tell you why it's very different. So, for example, Cyprus was a British colony. My mum and dad were born British, so they grew up learning English. They had the Greeks nearby because it was a mixed island, and the British were there. So it was a very different, if you like, different beast to someone who's born and bred Turkey. Totally different. They are. I suppose an example of it might be Northern Ireland. And Southern Ireland compared to people in England. You know, there's that kind of, and maybe Hong Kong compared to the rest of China. So it's quite different. And so imagine a Turkish Cypriot kid in Turkey with guests and family around, and I'd be having this conversation with them and they go, well, so you don't believe in education system, you don't believe in the nationalism, you don't believe in schools, you don't believe in this, you don't believe in any of this stuff. What do you believe in? And I go, well, I'll tell you, but you're not going to like my answer. Do you want to hear my answer? Imagine.
He's a kid.
This is like a 14-year-old, if that, and they'd be like 15 people.
Surprised they didn't clip your
all like, all right, go on then. I've gone.
What was your dad thinking?
My dad, he goes. My dad said to me when I was growing up, the problem with you is you're not afraid of anyone. You couldn't. I wasn't intimidated by the teachers. I wasn't intimidated by nobody. Why am I going to be intimidated by you? You know, not if you start hitting me or you start beating me up, I can't really do much about that. But if we're talking, I can hold my own. So anyway, so we're in this conversation, you don't believe in nationalism, you don't believe in this, you don't believe in that. Because over there they've got national conscription. You know, everyone goes to the army. They've got one of the biggest standing armies on, And
their training is lethal.
Yeah. Well, they're all lethal.
Well, not just the training, I'm saying.
They
die, don't they, on a regular basis.
So, you don't believe in all these things, what do you believe in? I said, well, I'll tell you. I said, I believe in you. And they just stopped dead and they look at me like... Anyway, did you watch the match last night? They really had no idea how to handle that. I believe in you. I'm not going to believe in something grander than that. So it's going to take me out of my unique experience as a human being. I'm going to growing up as a Turkish Cypriot, you had to pledge allegiance, you had to read things, and I wouldn't do any of that. And I got thrown out of class all the time. So this isn't to do with Englishism and anti-Europe or it's actually anti-establishment. It's anti-collectivisation in that way, i.e. there's this group over here that, like you said, the tribe, this tribe and that tribe. And yes, we did evolve like that. But, we are evolving. And as a species, if we look at the current activity and the commitment, say, if you like what they call American adventurism, is going off to, it's literally become a military state. It's the most funded, most resourced, most, it's now got an incredible budget that they have to keep war perpetuated to keep it going, because if they stop, what's going to happen to it? What happens to the economies? What happens to so my view is very, very different. Very different.
Yeah, I suppose I don't know enough about the economy, how it's interlinked within, the military.
Well, let me ask you this, right? There's
you need to get a politician on.
No. Who is it? Joseph Campbell.
Okay.
Said something along the lines of, if you want to know what a society is up to, look at its biggest buildings, its biggest organisations, and that will tell you what it's committed to. So if we look down at England, you'll see that the biggest buildings are the ones owned by the banks. You'll see the biggest buildings are the ones owned by the government. You'll see the biggest buildings are the ones owned by the military.
That's historical though, isn't it?
Oh yeah, no, I'm just quoting Joseph.
200 or 300 years
and then
ago.
shopping malls. Shopping malls. And you kind of look at...
I don't see any massive buildings owned by the military. Banks and...
No, not necessarily buildings, but organised, like let's say US Army is the biggest, most resourced, most funded, most advanced, and all its black ops as well. I'm talking about the whole military.
Well, but of course, because it's the only true superpower left, of course it's going to have a bigger military than the rest of us. But when you compare it to their overall GDP, it's not that much different to what... it's a little bit more than what we spend.
It's huge.
Oh no, but when you look at the percentage of GDP, it's it's sort of double or something. I don't know what it is exactly, but it's...
I don't know the number, so you got me off there, but yeah.
But when you look at their overall GDP compared to ours, it's not.
But it's interesting.
We're just pretty small.
It's interesting what you said. There was this line of, the demarcation point that you presented, that before 9/11 it was peacekeeping, and now it's about terrorism. The whole thing changed on 9/11. You had the Patriot Act, and it became a different animal after that. Some of these things have been written. They were written years ago what the plannings were. So in my experience,
I don't.
no. They're written in books. They're books. Even there's a general.
Some books.
Hey, we've got all the books.
We've got it written in some books.
Like, no. Military strategy books and all sorts of things about Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, Sudan.
But going back to what
written up like 20-something years ago.
Going back to what Joe was saying earlier, though, because of 1989, wasn't it? The internet kind of got off the ground, and World Wide Web and social media. Do you not think that there is a...
Well, we didn't really hit social media until
no, but what I'm saying is,
maybe
that's the point, is it's relatively recently. 89 is not that long ago.
Yeah.
So it's in our lifetime, and it's happened massively. And there is no hiding now from the point of view of, we know what everything's going on around the world. We can go to Google and we can zoom in and see what's going on in a certain place anywhere. So do you think there's a place where governments that are desperately trying to hide things are finding it harder and harder to keep things away from Joe Public?
Question I can ask. No, at the moment there's a wave of independent news agencies being shut down. From on Google, not on Google, on YouTube. Obviously, Google, YouTube, same difference. So they're getting shut down. They're getting.
Obviously, China doesn't want to.
I'm talking about America and US more than China. I mean, that's a whole different area. But there's a whole load of, if you like, independent news media that's being now attacked. And in the old days, so for example, up until a little while ago, if you ran an independent news agency, every click, every view would start paying you some money. All that changed, and now they're literally actively shutting them down. So the mainstream media at the moment, there's probably about 5 or 6 agencies that run the global media. Sky, BBC, probably one of the biggest ones. But the thing is, if you're being fed a certain story narrative within a certain remit, and it covers 90% of news media and all these, because they're funded to the hill, to create their stories. And also there's a fantastic piece where, if you want to know you're being brainwashed, watch this. And you see all these different news agencies spiel out the same script.
But let me ask you, how do you find the media that you watch now?
You've asked a really good question actually, because I'm not probably like most people, so I'm prolific. So I realised quite a while ago that the mainstream news is BS. Mainly because when I was growing up, I'd see Turkish news and I'd see English news, and are they even saying the same? So I worked out that these things aren't news. And it was very early on, and I think it was to do with my travels and going. And you go to Turkish, you watch news on the Turkish channel. It's like, and then you go to America and their news is complete. So how can the news be that different? Because there's obviously somebody creating the narrative, right? So I came away from that a long time ago, and then with I suppose before internet, I was always a researcher. So I would go off-piste and explore sociology.
A little bit like this conversation then.
Yeah, I would go off-piste because I just found that how can I put it to you? This is very unusual because most people don't have this experience. So growing up in an English school, they'd teach you English history.
Yeah.
That'd be Henry VIII, the British, and all varieties of stuff. Yeah, right. And then I'd go to Turkish school and they start talking about Atatürk and this and that and this and that. It's like, and the narratives were so, and I'm being told this one's the right one, this is what you should believe. Mainly by my dad and the Turkish side. Yeah. And then I'd go to school and I'd be like, well, that's a load of rubbish. And then I look at that and I go, actually, that's rubbish too. So then I'd start to dig deeper, and I had this inquisitive nature where I just wanted to explore. So how I explore now is I don't read, I get audiobooks. Yeah. I will find a researcher or a speaker, then I kind of get obsessed with them for a period of time, and then they'll talk about someone else or something else that happened. So it'll come up with, say, the JFK incident maybe, and I'll research JFK, and then I'll find there's lots of different people that have written and talked about it, and there's a lot of disinformation, and and then you find that there's a view of it from over here, and some of it is covered here and some of it's covered, but there's gaps, there's bits that they've missed, and I think on some level, and I've had this conversation with really probably more intelligent people have this argument with me more than not so intelligent because they probably give up, but they go, well, okay, so where should I get my information from? And I'm like, do you realise how dumb you just sounded? Because you'd know where you should get your information from. You owe it to yourself as an intelligent, self-actualising human being to work it out for yourself. Now, that doesn't mean you and I will agree on that, because you will have a different experience of how you've I don't know, compiled the information and come up with conclusions. So that, to me, we don't have a forum generally where people can really converse different ideas and still be okay about that we're seeing it and being open to maybe hearing it a different way.
Yeah, see now that is interesting because what I've got a bit of a bugbear about at the moment is the idea of social media when you're getting a personalised news feed.
Oh yeah. It's an echo chamber, isn't it?
Yeah, because all it's doing, it's being delivered to you by an algorithm, and that algorithm, all it wants to do is get you to click the like button. So it will know what you like, and it will just deliver you more and more and more of that stuff. So then you end up in your echo chamber, and then you can look at politics in this country or politics in the States, and we're getting more and more polarised. Whereas actually, and it's because we're relying on our media to be delivered to us in a personalised feed, and we're just not going to get anything from an opposing view. So how do we get around that? It is by researching. I suppose the only thing is that how do you make sure that when you're researching, you're not just staying in your own little echo chamber, and it's just confirmation bias.
So, moving swiftly on to another subject, but on the tail of that, in Swarm, potentially could be a public service whereby a piece of information goes on and then everyone can jump in and decimate or give opinion or have a look at to kind of work out what they...
Well, can I rewind a bit? I want to get to Swarm because I think it's a really interesting area and we'll probably spend more of our time on that than anything else.
Yeah.
But
I mean, we can fit a whole hour with politics. And
look, listen, this is an attack. I'm not
This is
any way, right?
But
I think the key here is what I say to people, and this is a personal development thing. You want to be great at sales? Read 5 sales books. Different authors.
They'll all say different things.
And they'll all say different things, and you'll work out.
Yeah,
exactly. So to me, you do 20 hours on the subject, and please come back and talk to me then. Yeah. That's what I say to people now. Because if I'm presenting an idea that I've spent not 20 hours, decades around, and I'm going to talk to you about a subject, I've learned myself now not to try and convince anyone or anything. Yeah. I just gauge where they're at, and I go, well, go and have a look at that. You might be, that's how I approach it. But at my level, I follow, and I've followed many different independent authors, speakers. Usually, see the more mainstream it is, the more funneled that is. That really is an echo chamber. Whether it's science, whether it's space exploration, you take almost any subject within the mainstream, and it is completely diluted and washed down. And it's like when you get out of it and you get esoteric, you find that these subjects are much deeper, much more complex than maybe a nice,
BBC presenter.
Yeah. That doesn't mean there isn't some interesting work, but you find they go so far and then they stop. Because if you go a bit further than that, they're starting to say something that won't get aired. So there's a guy called Michael Rupert. Have you heard of Michael Rupert? No. Okay. Michael Rupert was this is what I'm saying. You've got to get credibility of who your sources are. So Michael Rupert was he grew up with his parents were high security clearance people. I think one was military and the other one was in government, his mum and his dad. And then when he got to a certain age, he was asked to be part of the FBI or CIA. He said, no, not interested. He joined the DEA. So he was a cop. No, he wasn't DEA, he was a cop. And he uncovered, and this thing about American Army bringing in drugs back in the 70s and 80s? Did you ever hear about it? No. Well, he uncovered that. Okay. Right? He was ignored for years and years by CIA, FBI, DEA, because they're all complicit, they're involved in it. His life got threatened. Anyway, after that career, he came out of the police, because he was in fear of his own safety. Now, he's got 2 interviews with Joe Rogan, which are fantastic. Now, on one of those interviews with Joe Rogan's talking to me, he says, well, how comes you're not on the telly? Why are you not saying all this stuff? He goes, you can't, anybody on the telly has been so vetted, that there's a general recently, high up general, that talks about Syria and about the gas, and they cut him off midstream. So anybody saying something that goes against the narrative doesn't get to the mainstream media. So that was one of the ways you can tell. It's a very good way. Now, obviously, we've got people like Alex Jones and, I don't know if you know Alex Jones, big conspiracy kind of nut. But he does it to ridicule it. So people go, oh, you're going to tell me 9/11 was a conspiracy? Like, well, yeah, but if you've heard that, you're going to go, how can that possibly be true? So cognitive dissonance gets in the way. Because you say to yourself, as a normal, decent human being, how could it have been an inside job? You don't want to really deal with that. But if you start dealing with it and start doing the research, you'll start to ask questions, and people got answers to those questions that may be very uncomfortable.
Yeah. And
that's what cognitive dissonance is. It's uncomfortable. Now, many people can't be with the discomfort of information that goes contrary to what they're being fed. So I guess what I'm really saying is ultimately only you can work it out for yourself.
Yeah.
For you. Or you or whoever. So how far dare you go, and how far are you willing to invest in finding out what's going on? I find in my experience, most people not very far. Not very far to.
So I suppose I take this, to sort of bring it back to statism, tribalism. I like to try and remove myself from tribes. The irony that I've just joined your business. But I don't practice a particular religion. I don't follow a particular political party. I like to try and view the information, the facts as I see them at the time, before I go and vote one way or another. And in any sort of broad scale method of control, I question quite a lot now. The more that I've learned about how humans have had to cooperate through the years, how we've got stuff done, it doesn't surprise me that we were in the last, in the times of our parents and grandparents, we have been, it's been all about the state and state on state conflict, and I don't really see the point in that. I like to try and see everyone as human beings, and see their perspective.
One of our core values. Human being first.
Yeah, I suppose I don't worry too much about conspiracy theories in the past.
One of my little things about conspiracy theories, I saw a really fascinating program about was the moonwalk real? Did we really land on the moon? And the first part of the program was all about, obviously not, it was ridiculous. The flag was waving, this, then all these different reasons why. And then they go to the next part of the program with all these kind of eminent scientists, blah, blah, blah. And it wasn't on TV, I can't remember where I found it now, it was a film somewhere. And the guy, there was one particular guy that wanted desperately to believe it really happened. So he did as much research disproving the conspiracy theorists as they had done proving that these guys didn't walk on the moon. And he went to the Nevada desert and he set up as close to what he could possibly make, and it cost him hundreds of thousands of pounds, the moon surface. And he went through every single thing about the shadows were in this place and the desert, and there was no stars in the sky and all this. And he bang, 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 bang. And he just disproved every single one. And you're like, I don't know.
Yeah,
so it's
but I think I think it's interesting what you said. There's what you believe happened, and there's what you know happened by your personal first-hand experience.
Exactly.
And you will probably never know for sure.
No.
Because you weren't there.
So
exactly.
So overall, I try not to worry about that.
Yeah, and
I've got there's more stuff to worry about in the here and now.
And what do you worry about here and now?
What do I worry about in the here and now? I worry a bit about social media, and we've just seen the whole.
You talk about is it Cambridge Analytica?
Cambridge Analytica, but more again from a macro level, I worry about the behavioural impact that social media is having on society. Yep. And I'm not saying we shouldn't be on social media. But
it can be used for massive good.
Yeah, but it can be a lot. It can be a lot of fun. But it also the algorithms have an effect on our behaviour, and that's a sort of key. That's something that I don't think was ever really taken into account, and it's something that I feel very strongly about at Enswarm, that everything that we do with algorithms or our features or the user experience, we do to have a positive impact on the the group of people. We want to try and encourage good behaviours.
Yeah.
And when I say good behaviours, I'm talking about ones that will lead to the ultimate success of that team.
So empowering tools, empowering facilities to empower those organisations and teams to achieve their...
To get the best ideas forward. Have you considered taking it into schools? Because
I get that quite a lot.
as far as social media is concerned, that's the worst place for people being affected. I've seen so many teenage girls kind of go through this, oh, she doesn't like me anymore, look, it says it, and I haven't got a like on. And it rules their life.
Yeah.
Just it's horrendous.
So negative.
Yeah, massively.
Yeah, over likes and over sharing, it's hugely damaging for the psychology, particularly for teenagers.
Because also that, I'm as guilty as this, but the amount of time they spend on there, and now you kind of, this addiction to technology.
We're totally addicted to it.
Yeah. Really, I mean, it's really, it's like being at the head of the junkie. What do they call a junkie house? Like junkie house. Like and I'm head junkie. I've got my kids, and I'm like, I go to the kids. They've been on the.
Don't do as I do. Do as I tell you.
But I'm addicted as well. I'm there. Whether it's I can justify what I'm looking at. But can't we all?
Simon Sinek's big on this at the moment.
Yeah,
I'm not sure if you
the
follow.
millennials talk.
Yeah,
it's good, isn't it?
Yeah. But also, particularly on the mobile stuff, he's got this big. He talks about if him and his friends will go out, they'll take one phone for emergencies, and
everyone else is leaving behind.
Or if it's in meetings, they'll all put them in the corner, and more. He was talking. I saw him speak a few months ago, and he was talking about sort of companies that are putting phone racks in meeting rooms so that people will come in and actually be present.
There's nothing annoys me more is when you're in a situation in a meeting and you're having a conversation and somebody's like that. And I'm like, what am I?
But the thing with this addiction to tech is obviously every time you press the button or it flickers it gives you like a little hit, and you can't put the phone. We had a bet the other day with one of my friend's wives, and I said, I bet I won't pick up the phone before you do. And she was like, and I was pretending I was alright, but I was like, I'm okay because I know you're worse than me. And she was like, you could tell, it's like, let me pick up. And it was literally, I couldn't let go. It's like, it's like really, and if you look at it, we're all on the spectrum somewhere in the way, like picking
it's
out.
Super addictive.
Yeah,
it is, and it's designed to be addictive.
Yes.
So that is a core, difference to what we're doing.
Yeah.
We are.
Do you want to explain?
Yeah, tell us about it.
Okay, shall I explain?
Take it from the top.
From the top. Yeah. So
you're up.
From the sort of like. So teamwork was always my passion, and that's why I did join the army. And found myself in whatever you think about it, sort of politically, I found myself in some fairly challenging positions and learnt a lot about team performance. But also, I was a pilot, a helicopter pilot, so I would be working and in Afghanistan. That meant that we were always supporting other units, so I'd be kind of supporting one unit this week and then one the next week, and it was literally being the sort of you would fly on the wall to a certain extent of their planning process and their team culture, and so probably over several years of being on ops, I don't know how many sort of 50 or so different missions of 50 different.
And I imagine some of those teams, would they come together and disperse, or were they kind of a solid unit throughout the period?
Well, it varied. It was a different situation every time, and anyway, I was sort of just distilling out sort of lessons and things that people did, like the special forces won't wear rank, and then you don't know if you're speaking to kind of like a major or a corporal.
Do they hold themselves differently? Could you guess?
No, well, but. No, it's difficult. Well, you could, but you
could have been wrong.
but you would just always had to be respectful. So there's little things like that that I was sort of lessons I was learning, and I learned lots of lessons about sort of operational cycles, and then I was sort of applying those lessons to business. And anyway, I came back from Afghanistan, and I knew I wanted to leave and do something to do with teamwork. Then I read this book called The Smart Swarm by Peter Miller, all about how bees and ants actually evolved to think together. And that kind of really inspired me.
Do they kind of set up this kind of neural net of behaviour, don't they? They all link into each other. So like when you watch the sparrows.
Or
is that this?
Okay, now
that's a swarm, isn't it?
That's a flock. That is really different. Okay, so this is where I go off on a totally different tangent. Okay. So most people that talk about collective intelligence, collective behaviour, will say a flock of birds, a swarm of bees, a herd of sheep. It's all the same. It's collective behaviour. I say it's quite different. So when you actually look at the evolution of it, we split from insects 400 million years ago. We split from birds a lot less than that, and sort of it all. But it was at that point, I think, that at 400 million years ago, insects and collectively intelligent insects actually learned to think together, whereas we use collective behaviour, and we, like us, fish, birds, as a method of survival. So if you think about like a swarm of bees, why a swarm happens. It's like the colony, the hives, the colony's got too big for the hive. A new queen gets born, half of them go off, and the new queen takes half of the bees with her. They hang out somewhere, just like on the side of a house or something. And then what the swarm is doing, it's a decision-making mechanism to go and find a new hive location. And what they'll do is send scouts out and then come back and communicate, I found a really, one over one side will say, I found an okay
It's got
place.
2 bedrooms, bathroom.
Genuinely, it's a bit like that.
How do they do that? Is that through sense of consciousness? Is it through innate?
I don't know that, but
it's handed down from father to son.
Well, it's
They're on right move, going, look at the bedroom.
go and look it up, it's fascinating. There are all sorts of, but they come back and they've done all these experiments where they sort of have frozen bees, then like painted them and numbered them and filmed them, and
they do communicate by dancing.
They dance,
don't they?
They do a waggle dance, and then so if you've got like a swarm in the middle, and this is a great hive location, and this is a really like an okay one, scout bees will go there, come back. The one from the really good one will go crazy, and then 3 more bees will go over and look at that one. Whereas over here, like this one will say, this one's okay.
No, my one's really great. They'll go, no, that great.
And then 1 more bee. But depending on how vigorously they dance, like more bees will go.
That's you're describing me. I'm just like that.
So through the medium of dance, like choosing houses by the medium of dance. But
try that.
But what then happens is like 3 will come back, and then it'll go to 9, and then whereas this way it'll be sort of 1 and 2 and. So
let me just. I haven't spent enough. I've hardly spent any time on a swarm. I've spent a bit of time, but I'm getting introduced. So what you're saying is that it's almost like, I wouldn't say democratic, but it's kind of like by activity, the best option comes out, but not by. It's not that he said it's great. It's that the group consciousness ends up with clearly this is where we should go.
Yeah, to a certain extent, or
enough of a tipping.
Yeah, maybe enough of a tipping point. But what we're doing is sort of filtering up the best ideas, but. Because the bee stuff was just a bit of an inspiration. We've gone on a bit of a tangent, haven't we? Explaining bees. Anyway, but
that's where it started, though, wasn't it?
But swarms. We were talking about swarms and flocks, like so. But if you look at herds of wildebeest, flocks of sheep, flocks of sheep, flocks of birds, we have that collective behaviour they exhibit that collective behaviour for just self-survival. So they wouldn't send scouts out to go and think together. It's just about I'm protecting me, and the best way to protect me is to be in a group, and we've got that in ourselves. Safety numbers. But when I say we've got that in ourselves, you look at any of the sort of like crowd disasters, and it's happened because people will just run together and clump together, and then that sort of pressure ends up killing other people by pressure. And it's, we've got that herding instinct in us. Well, you look at fashion, you look at stock market bubbles and crashes. That's a herding instinct. It's not a swarming instinct. So I say that swarming and herding is
very different.
Very, very different. And no one's really saying that. We're kind of unique saying that. So what I came to the conclusion was that swarming was just something that we just naturally couldn't do because of the way that we've evolved. So that got me into looking at, well, how did humans evolve to think, which got me into the whole world of behavioural economics and, you know, Daniel Kahneman, thinking fast and slow, identification of these human cognitive biases that we've got, because that is how we think, you know. And the recent research on that is to say that these, what we call human biases, that are these framework methods that of how we think, they're not flaws in our thinking. They were features that kept us alive, but they were features that kept us alive for most of our evolution in the Stone Age, when we were in small tribes of 150 people, hunting and gathering. You know, we trusted the people, you know, we trusted our own tribe over the other, in group, out group. That's very good for keeping us together because, you know, our group is less likely to kill us, and if we all stay together, we're more likely to survive. So you evolve over millions of years, the ability, the belief that my lot are the best, so I'll stay here. But now, in modern business, that same mistrust of others, and when it just holds you back when you're actually trying to collaborate or work together in some sort of big matrix organisation, you've been thrown together in a project, and you're not given the opportunity to get sort of comfortable as a team, to build up that level of trust.
So would that be like, say, in bigger organisations, that'd be like, you have almost like people, like organisational silos, you know, like the accounts department don't you know, there's all this, you know, all that kind of stuff.
Or even, we're the accounts department in this building. We're so much better than the accounts department. Those guys are all messed up. But we know what we're really doing. Like, those guys are just...
You ever been on a team that you thought they were rubbish, I'm going to get out of this team?
No, of course not. No. My team's amazing. But that's... Like, I had a mate of mine in the army that said that, you know, he must be the common denominator of all of the best teams in the army, because every team that they went in, they were like, yeah, we're the best, we're the best, not them over there. And I said, well, that's what the last lot was saying. I'm
must be
here.
me.
Anyway,
what problem are you solving within Swarm?
So if you look at the ways we evolved, I looked at it and said, no, we just can't think together in as good a way, you know, as swarms of bees and ants. There has got to be, I sort of consider them to be the highest performing teams on the planet.
But if we go further...
we're going on so many tangents.
But if we go further, we can't perform as well. So what gets in the way of performance then? Because obviously if you're saying there's a way to perform that's better, you're saying there's something inherently doesn't work very well in the way that, if you like, the default way of engaging would be. So
the reasons, because of all of these human biases that we've got in place now, they lead to things like groupthink. They lead to things like, you know, when you're in it, and let's look at how we normally communicate now. In general, we will do our team thinking in meetings. So we'll get together, we'll have a discussion, and we'll have some sort of question, or what should we call our new what should we call our new consultancy? And you'll have a discussion and you'll talk about it.
Should I pull rank on that?
So here's an interesting question.
I was told to pull rank by many people, so just pick a name, whatever.
but that's what we do. So think, how many people were involved in that decision for you guys?
You asked 3 people. But the decision was 2.
The decision was the decision was mine. As in who, because everybody said you pick it. And we're happy whatever you pick. And then I came here to Jill, so I've got a few names in mind, and then we came up with a name. Usually, like, it was me, obviously, but Jill goes, no, it was me. But long story short, it came out of the collaboration. Like, we were playing with it, and something came out, popped out, that I wouldn't have got on my own, and I don't think you would have ever got that on your own.
Let's think of it. Maybe you guys are a slightly weird example, because
I was just going to say that.
Probably.
I think in most organisations, and I'll be very sexist here, if a large corporate is going to be having groupthink, it's a male-dominated environment, and in a male-dominated environment, you have a lot of ego.
Yeah. So if you've got let's say we've got 10 people in a room, heavily male-dominated environment, a lot of people thinking in the same way, but then actually you've got lots of interpersonal relationships. Well, I don't really, Erkan and I are going up against each other for this next promotion. So, in a meeting,
I'm going to go against what he says.
Well, whatever you say, I'm just going to say, oh no, I disagree.
A bit like The Apprentice.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
There's no worry about you look good, am I? Because it's
a great example.
Yeah.
So people
dog
are not.
eat dog.
It is.
So can I?
Yeah. Okay.
Is that goes, Jack? Right?
Pop in there. Remember, we'll come back to that.
In the context of fierce scarcity competition, we've been conditioned to compete. We've been conditioned to fear, and there isn't enough. So I've got to get to the egg before you get to the egg. But if we said to ourselves, right, let's lay love, connection, abundance over it, how would we operate inside of that?
Yeah.
Like you said, we're a bit different because I don't have an ego about coming up with a name.
Yeah.
Now, on a level, of course.
You think you don't.
Yes. And I get that. But also, I didn't hold on to the privilege that I got a name. No, it wasn't like I said, right, I'm naming it.
Yeah.
It was, right, we need a name for the new consultancy, guys. Give me some, let's, catalyse some and we came up with a load of names. Probably could have picked any one of them. Maybe a couple of them probably wouldn't have done. But the point was, I wasn't feeling it. And there is a thing where you kind of get something feels right. Going back to the Sinek, it just doesn't feel right. You want something that feels right. It kind of clicks. Yes.
Keep going.
Right, and then today. But Gill and I used to come up. We're saying we're leading a global.
So how long have you guys been working together?
4 years.
So how well do you think you know each other?
Yeah, pretty well.
Yeah. So that you've had the chance to form yourselves into.
It's taken a lot of hard work to get to where we are today.
Yeah, but
and there's a lot of alignment,
a lot of trust, a lot of alignment, and so that's why the army does well, because you spend a lot of time getting to know each other on a personal basis. Like I know you guys know each other very well. In business, you're never given that time to
especially if you're in a competitive.
Yeah. It's like, hey, here you go. Well, the teams are always changing. It's not like, well, when I got back from Iraq, they split our unit up, and we got a whole load of new people. And they said, right, well, you're not going to Afghanistan for another year. And our helicopters weren't even there at the time. They were being upgraded. So it's kind of like, right, well, go and have some long lunches together and get to know each other. And honestly, you just go and have some beers together and get to know each other. And that's how you build up that trust.
That takes time.
And it takes time.
And investment.
In business, we don't have that time.
No.
Well, going back to what you said about the bees.
Yeah.
One goes. See, one of the things Gill and I think we've established, and I'll be honest with you, it wasn't that hard between us.
Yeah.
It wasn't like we had to get over. There's other people we've collaborated with that was much more challenging.
Yeah.
Jill and I have kind of always. It was always what's best for the mission.
Yeah, but the thing is with you guys, because you're in business together and it's a small business, the only way that Jill's going to succeed is also if you succeed, Erkan. There's no way. Whereas in a corporate,
you won't have that.
You don't have that. People are not. When you're in this big machine, you're not at the position where the only way that you can succeed is by making the big corporate work, because it's going to be there anyway.
Yeah.
It's
long before,
Yeah, long after. So what you do is end up what's best for me.
Yeah.
Which is the normal sort of human condition, and actually human motivation when it comes down to it is always what's best for me and what's best for my family. It is not what's best for this new team member who have just turned up and I don't even know them.
But this is part of the history of BeCollaboration was an antidote to that.
Yeah.
So one of the day,
which is why I immediately loved what you were doing.
Yeah.
So
But let me give you an example. So when I used to go into businesses pre-Gill, and I go into business, I'd always recommend what I thought was the best for them, to my detriment. And I did it twice, and I didn't do it a third time. Because what happened was, so for example, I'd send someone in. I've had clients saying to me, "Look, can we put you on hold while we work with Joe?" He'd be like, "Oh, I just done myself out. What idiot would do that?" So I did it again, just to prove I would do it, right? But I knew in myself that the best thing for them was to do that work.
Yeah.
So and then I did that on the second time, and the guy said to me, "I recommended." He said, "Why don't you bring me in under you?" I'm like, "Yeah, that comes with all complexity. I don't know how good you are, feeling. It creates something else." But part of the BeCollaboration commercial offering is when we come in and review a business's situation. Now, if you're an accountant, you go in, you go, "Well, we've got to change all your account website. You need a new website. Sales trainer. You need a sales trainer. Customer service." You get my point. What else are they going to talk about? But as BeCollaboration, we go into a business, we can go, right, we've assessed all this, what you really need is some sales training. Before we do anything else. I'm not a sales trainer, but, you know, him over there, he's a sales trainer, get him in. Or, you know, what you need to do is sort your systems out. What's going to give, so part of that offering is what's going to give that organisation the biggest return, the biggest impact to their business for time, money and effort. Now, nobody's really doing that because we're operating one in atomisation, self-interest, in competition, fear and scarcity. So there's that atomisation, that separation. But actually, if we put the business at the forefront, then you do what's best for them.
So how are you going to find out the real problems in the business when you go in?
Obviously, if it's me personally or if it's us as an organisation, obviously there's a certain level of due diligence. There's we've got we've designed sort of like questionnaires. We've designed, you know, look at it from a financial point of view, look at it from a marketing point of view, team morale point of view. Depends. You know, look, at the end of the day, if we're getting paid 500 quid, there's no way we could do that survey. But essentially, there's a review.
So you're looking at, look, what are you getting when you're getting a questionnaire or a survey?
Feedback.
Opinion.
Yeah, but what you're doing, you've presupposed.
No, I get what you're saying. There's what they'll tell you, but there's a certain level of.
But you've also presupposed what the problems are, and you're asking them a set of questions rather than just sort of necessarily more open. Quite, I'm going to answer your questionnaire.
No, just personally, it would be a dialogue. It wouldn't be a survey. But I'm saying is we have designed those things well. But when I go into a business, obviously I'm looking at it through my experience, my lens. But I've done, you know, it's like anything. I've done it quite a few times. I'm not going in there with a view they need an accountant or they need a website.
I get it.
Yeah.
But how can you? I mean, from my point of view, it's like obvious. Is that something like in Swarm in that environment, you can then get that company to kind of flush out what the problems are.
Maybe I should explain, like, you know, how it actually works and why it's a bit.
Yeah, I'll put it in front of my face now, but I know I haven't done enough with it.
Because we keep getting sidetracked, don't we?
Shush for 5 minutes later.
Exactly what I'm saying, shut
up.
Polite.
It's polite. Yeah. It's so we were at the point with swarming, inspired by that. Bees. I determined that we can't swarm, but we also didn't evolve the ability to fly, but.
We'll get there anyway.
But the Wright brothers could see birds flying around, could see it's possible, go and design the plane. It's a tool to enable us to fly. In the same way, we've determined it is possible to swarm, so we've built the tool, but it's a very specific tool, and swarm, that allows us to do this more swarming-like collaboration. And because it increases the intelligence of the team, we're called a team intelligence platform. We think it's a new sector of technology. So, what it does though, and the problems you asked, the problems that it solves, the problems are the human bias. We've got to get over that human bias. It kept us alive for millions of years, but not so good in the modern age. And so this is. Let's think about a corporate meeting now. If you've got a question that you're trying to come up with. Or trying to solve. Our knee-jerk reaction at the moment is to say, right, we'll have a meeting. Let's throw some ideas around, and then we'll determine some actions and we'll go and do them. Now, in that meeting, how likely is it that meeting, you know, if there are 10 people there, all with an average IQ of 100 for easy maths, you know, what's the actual team IQ in that meeting? With hierarchy, with personality mix, it's probably more likely to be 200 to 300. People are going to be disengaged. What's the point? You know, that there's an expert. Oh well, you know, Erkan's the marketing expert.
What's
What's the point of me even thinking? So people disengage and turn off their brains. They go to their happy place. They go on their phones, and so what you've actually got in a room with a potential IQ of 1,000 in the room, you're probably using sort of 200 to 300 of it. And then the actions are based on that. Now, then you've got those people are disengaged. They haven't really been involved. They're probably there, well, not probably, they're quite often there thinking, oh, well, you know, how often have you been in a meeting thinking, God, I wouldn't do it like this if you really asked me. But, you know, everyone happy with that? Yeah, go on.
So would you say that's a conspiracy of mediocrity?
It's a...
I had to get conspiracy back
Yeah.
on.
Yeah, you did get
But
conspiracy
you see
back
what I'm
on.
saying? It's like,
Yeah,
it is almost, isn't it? It's like...
It's just an acceptance of the status quo,
Yeah.
and
An easy life.
it's an easy life. When people say to me, "Oh, I pick my battles,"
Yeah.
I think, well,
So why has it got to be a battle?
well, it shouldn't be a battle, but also you should just be able to tell the truth, and then have your say
Without someone jumping down. the throat.
without it being then held against you down the line. And all of our... So what we do is we do two things with our technology. We neutralise human bias, or the effects of human bias, because we can't get rid of them. So we neutralise them, and we largely use anonymity in a specific way that I know we can talk about. And then we also motivate the individuals towards team success. So if you say that the team, and we do that with a certain element of, although we hide the names of who's saying what, we monitor who is doing what, and then we give you a certain amount of recognition for it against. So we can tell at the end of an NSwarm how engaged someone has been, and also how much value that they've added, without necessarily saying Erkan said exactly this, Gill said exactly this. Now we can also, we track that as well, so we are not anonymous, but we just use anonymity in a very specific time at the beginning to, we call it more, say, the psychologists would call it, it's psychological safety. So when you're coming up with ideas, you're in this position of psychological safety, that you're not worried about this is a bit of a crazy idea, what are people going to think of me?
Yeah.
Don't worry about that, just chuck it in. No one knows it's you. Or it's it's a bit of an idea that might not be so popular, but is the right thing to do. If your boss has just come up with an idea that you think is absolutely rubbish, but it's your annual appraisal tomorrow.
With a pay rise.
Is the last thing before you go in to speak to her tomorrow, is the last thing you want for her to remember,
So is this so this sounds like something specifically aimed at certain teams of certain size. So is it kind of loses its, because obviously there's only three of you doing it, you probably work out who's who anyway, because maybe the anonymity is nowhere near as important when there's three of you. So it's a tool.
It's a tool at that point. So it's mainly used for, it's in two phases, and it's mainly used for developing ideas. So if you've got a question to answer, we say that the main point of a meeting at the moment, which is how we typically will do and we'll develop our ideas, is you've got a question, you've got ideas, you try and pick the best one to action. So we will say with NSwarm, you can put a question in, you can invite everyone in, and it's a mind map interface. You then all start to put your ideas, and if you've got issues with them, you put them in, you can ask questions, answer them. You're doing that at that point without knowing who's saying what, and then you can see all of the other content, and I could see your content, I wouldn't necessarily know it was you. Then for every piece of content, we get everyone else to rate the value that you think it adds to the conversation. So if it's a good question, rate it highly. If it's a great idea, rate it highly. If you think it's bad, you rate it down. But you don't know if it's come from an expert, your best friend, your arch nemesis. All of the personal part at the ideas phase is taken away. So we've flattened a hierarchy there. It might be you can put a CEO and an intern in the same NSwarm, and get them to develop ideas together, and you can get them to be way more honest than they would be. And it's not necessarily about I wouldn't do it, and you don't think about it consciously. These are unconscious biases. We are programmed.
Well, it goes in the positive as well, because when we tried it out, we had fun. And I was saying to the guys in the meeting that we're going to be trying this out. And I said, well, what's the point? If it's a marketing question, we might as well go to Scott and he's going to tell us what we do about marketing.
That's one of the things I had written.
It was interesting, wasn't it?
So at the ideas phase, what you're talking about there is, what's the point? It's called chasing the expert, and it reduces the IQ of a team.
Yeah.
So in the whole wisdom of crowd, collective intelligence, if you're bringing experts in, Scott's flown in from America, like he's going to save the
All
day.
hail, yeah.
Yeah, you know, that's what we want to do. But Scott's been thinking about something from the same way for many years because he's an expert. Now, it might be that you've brought some new person in that might just look at it from a totally different perspective.
Yeah.
But at the ideas phase, you want ideas coming in from anywhere.
Yeah.
Just throw them in. And what you want is that, ideally, is the culture for that not to matter, for no one to hold those ideas against you in the long term.
Yeah.
But in most environments, that's very difficult to do. And even listening to the way that you guys were talking about it, and say, of course, we should just listen to Scott, and there were all sorts of.
By the way, I would never have said that.
But this is the thing. It's even within your group, and you're a high functioning team. There's no real hierarchy there. There's going to be unconscious social pressures. We've
had it.
Yeah,
mate, we have had it.
Yeah.
I mean, we kind of went through some very challenging phases where old thinking met this new kind of self-organising till thinking, which we'll say more about. But just going back to one thing. So, for example, language really enables. Yeah. So, big difference between us and bees and all the other things is we have language, and you're right, we have behavioural biases for sure. Yeah. But for example, one of the things that we don't use is the word expert within BeCollaboration. So I've said, look, what happens with an expert?
Except when you were talking about it on your recording, because you said that he's a marketing expert.
Did I? No.
I might not have been you.
Oh no, it wouldn't be me. I wouldn't use that terminology. If I did, please play it back to me. But no, it wasn't me. Yes, exactly. Because that default language comes in. So when I think expert, why do I want to use that language? I don't want to introduce. Here's Joe. He's an expert. Because immediately that disempowers people around you, right? And also, it stops the people who are not. The thing with expert gives you a mandate to be right. Because if I open my mouth, I'm an expert. Yeah. So therefore, I've got to go. I'm more guarded. You've got to be right. So let's put that pressure on you. Yeah. But if we say you're a specialist in something, we can all have a view about what could work. Yeah. Whereas as soon as we're all empowered. So being a specialist is different from being an expert. Yeah, that's true. Totally different language.
That's interesting.
So in terms of saying, in terms of collaborating. So collaborating, we say that you've got these different specialisms, but we use this idea, and I think we're going to give a definition of collaboration earlier, right? So we look at a challenge or an opportunity, and there's three of us looking at that subject. We're looking at it, and your view is very different to me. What do you see on that side? You probably see.
I see pirate of laboration.
There you go. You haven't got the whole picture. That's how we like it, right? Gill can see the logo. Let's put it like that. So Gill can see the logo. I can see that. You can't even see the handle. So my perspective gives me handle. Yours. So the thing is that we've got these unique perspectives through our filter of our specialisms. As soon as we become an expert, I'm telling you how it should be. Yeah. It's now become something else. I'm nailed to the ground because I'm an expert, and that's what my expertise tells me we should be doing. Yeah. So I've got to be right about that. You're saying something completely different, challenges, and then now we've lost the opportunity to collaborate. Yeah. If I say, look, in my view, these are the things we need to be thinking about, and these are the things I'd like you to consider. Yeah. You can go, I can consider that, and and you can contribute. So the whole dynamic is different. Now, the outcome is that we get something we could never have done on our own. Yeah.
So that is exactly the concept that we're trying to get with N-Swarm as well. So it's in two phases. The swarming phase, where it's this mind map where you can't see who's saying what, but you can see all the content coming in, and then everyone's rating everything else. And you can also, if there are ideas in there that you think, as a result of this meeting, we should action that. If the original question was, what's the name of our consultancy going to be, and there's been a bit of a debate about it, and then it's come out that it wants to be, someone said it could be this name. If everyone then starts sort of tagging that as an action and rating it highly, great. So then if Gill was chairing this N-Swarm, she would then switch it into analysis mode, and that's when we then bring it back out into the open. So I don't know when you played with it, whether you actually switched it into analysis mode. Okay, so this is the second bit. So what it does then is it takes all of our different perspectives. So my perspective over here, Jill's over here, yours over here.
But you still don't know who they are. It's just starting to score them by the interaction.
So all it does is, if there is one idea, if there were several different ideas within it, and if people had tagged them as actions, we'll then give you, here's the list of actions. And here's the top one, here's the second, third, fourth, but here's how many people tagged it as an action, here was the overall scores. If you wanted to dig all the way into the Excel to find out who said what, you can, but you don't need to. But so what we give you is the ability to focus in very quickly on, here's a summary of all of your different perspectives, here's where you agree, here's where you disagree, so now talk about that. You don't have to waste time talking about
who
what
said
you
what,
thought. You can talk about why you could talk about why you thought it. So if there was one idea that had a big spread and some people loved it and some people hated it, instead of wasting time, one person proposing the idea and then another person arguing about it, about what they thought, we can just look at it and say, well, why do we think that? And it enables you to focus in on the really core issues. So it shortens meetings.
That's what I like.
Yeah, we can get to much. So we say we can get a team, all of the IQs thinking together much more effectively. We'll get you to better actions faster. But then on the motivation side, because in the background, the harder you've worked, the more good content you've put in. So if you put in lots of content, you'll get quite a high engagement score. We could say, Gill was in there sort of every day over 4 days, putting stuff in. Erkan went in and chucked a couple of bits in.
That sounds
about right.
2, that's a lot for me.
Yeah. So at the end we give you 2 levels of score. We give you an engagement score and a value add score, because now all of the bits of content that you put in, if lots of other people voted, said that's really high value, without necessarily knowing that it was Gill, then at the end of it, you'll get these just rankings of engagement and value. And what that does is it gets people looking at themselves. So if your engagement scores are through the roof because you've just been putting loads of stuff in, like I agree, exclamation mark, it doesn't really add much value. And so what we see over a couple of different end swarms is that people have been ideating, thinking of all these ideas and trying to decide what we should do as a team in this position of psychological safety where we're not worrying about all the personality. Then at the end, they're looking at the scores and saying, oh, well, no, I have actually managed to add value. You, over a couple of end swarms, you're trying to improve your performance at how you can become a better team collaborator. So that's why we are fundamentally different to all of the other ideation platforms out there, where it's, I've got an idea, it's a social media interface, how many likes can I get? So it's a popularity contest. I'm going back there, I've got no idea on an end swarm whether my idea is going to be good until the facilitator switches it into analysis mode and we sit down.
Does that then go for everybody? That once it's switched into analysis mode, everyone sees.
But you can't see who said what. No. The only person that can see, the people scores is the facilitator, the person that's got the admin rights. We don't yet know. We've done the Excel download to potentially link that into people departments or HR departments on a long term, so that you can, because what we want to give people is a way for them to be recognised for the value that they add on a consistent basis. So, what do people want out of work, really? I mean, would you rather feel like you're making a difference and making an impact, or would you rather feel that you're a drone within?
Yeah, you've held your own in the meeting.
Yeah.
So who seems to be? What are your? I don't know current state of the business. How many clients you know? Who? I imagine some organisations will look at that and go, "There's no way we're going to do that ever." Because hierarchical, more.
So we don't necessarily say that. So I was in the army; it was very hierarchical. But now, if I had time, if we were trying to do something a bit weird and wonderful, a new mission, I would ask for diverse inputs from my soldiers. Now, a lot of the time, they would come out with things that we just couldn't do. They would say, we should do it like this. And I said, right, well, I think you might...
In the real world.
I know why you might think that, but we can't do that because of X, Y and Z. But the very fact that they've been asked for their ideas, and they've had explained why they couldn't do it the way they think it should be done, but now here's why we're going to do it the other way, they're then bought into the plan.
I would add something to that as well. I mean, maybe I don't know if this is a facility for it. So when I used to run businesses or work with clients, I really encourage engagement with the team and get everyone involved in that feedback. But I say to them, don't ask them for ideas. That's only half the step. Is come to me with how you're going to do it. Because rather than you telling them that we can't do it that way, because if you want to, I don't know, buy this new bit of kit, or you think we should move that bit of equipment over there, or whatever, change the order of what we do, come with the plan to do it. Yeah. So you've actually done some thinking, rather than just, hey, you know what we should do, whatever. It's come, so I don't have to then look at it and go, now I've got to work out how that's going to happen. No, you come with the way.
See, the thing is though, that is how we got stuff done before we had the capability with the technology that we've got now. So actually, you can think of this as, they can just throw their idea in, and then you can say, right, well, how can we achieve that? You could put a question in saying, how can we achieve that given X, Y and Z? And then it's on them to come back. But actually, what we're trying to do is this position of, it is psychological safety, where, and there's a lot of research out there to say the best ideas come from the team that also throw out the most ideas.
Because some of it, if you just throw enough at it, or if you just or unfilter it, because what you're doing is unfiltering it. So just whatever you think genuinely, obviously.
But it's also so there are writers. There's this great podcast on the Adam Grant podcast recently where he was looking at writers' rooms, comedy writers' rooms for the Daily Show in the USA, and so it's a political show, and it goes out in the evening based on the stories of the day. So high pressure, tens or hundreds of millions of people watching it, but they've got to turn this stuff around, and they've got whole teams of writers, and they're in these writers' rooms, and they're just in there, and the culture in there is no idea's a bad idea, throw ideas out there. They call it burstiness. That someone will say, hey, what about this? And then someone will, you get into a bit of a flow, and that might lead somewhere. And that's the sort of thing that we're trying to get on Enspawn, that someone can just all of the sort of worries about what will people think of me are gone. So even let's look at it in BeCollaboration, because I know that you guys, one of the comments that you had about, you wouldn't need the anonymous stuff. Right. So I would challenge that, because although you and at sort of the top of BeCollaboration are very comfortable, and you've built up your years of you being there, and you all know each other very well. Me as a new person, I'm not going to come in to a situation like that and sit around a table with you. Well, I might, some a bit.
No, I was thinking, I reckon you probably would. But I get
might be someone like you that's just joined. You're right.
So I can think of a couple of new people in the meeting that are more classic introverts. They were sitting at the back. They were considering everything. They don't like to be put under, introverts do not like to be put under pressure to thrash out ideas in a meeting room. For those people to be given a platform where they don't have to, they can remove themselves over a couple of days, they can think of their ideas in the time frame that they want to. That's the sort of thing that there are all of these different elements where we're trying to make it comfortable for people to think together. And my worry with, or why we won't give it the option to be able to switch into have an anonymous mode and a non-anonymous mode, because other companies do that. So you can cloak, but then of course you're going to have all the social pressures of, why are you not big enough man, Erkan, to why would you want to be able? Why do you have to cloak and then come out afterwards? You should. This company, we don't need the cloaking. We're a great team. Everyone thinks they're amazing, but actually, it's the people that at the sort of the top of the team. They're the ones that are sort of got this vested interest in the status quo, that they're the ones driving meetings and it's their ideas
and they
going
get their
forward.
way.
And they get their way. So, if we give it the option that you could have it uncloaked, or everyone openly, we would not get the magic that we get with Endswarm.
I agree, 100% agree, because even though you know people really well, I like the anonymity of not letting my judgment be clouded by a comment. So if I was looking at a comment, say it was a marketing thing, and I'm looking at that going, oh, I wonder if Scott said that. Should we do that? Because Scott's really good at what he does, and we should do what Scott says. I want to see it for a good idea and go, that's really brilliant. And then find out, oh, it might be Scott. Oh, it wasn't. It was that girl over there. And it gives you this kind of freedom. It really is freedom.
We've got a new intern who, in the meeting, and so we've actually been experimenting with using Endswarms in our meetings. So we'll start and we'll put out the topics, and then we'll say, right, okay, for the next 10 minutes, just dive in on the Endswarm. And Dimitri, our new intern, who was sitting in the corner, virtual, we were on video call, not saying much, of course, because all the rest of us are in there sort of doing our normal thing. 10 minutes later, he's come out with the top idea. The top action was something that he put in. Brilliant. And there was no way that would have come out.
Yeah.
But I also imagine there's that you can't be the new boy for very long, or the new girl, and you may see things that everyone is in the team, the way they've been operating. Hey, why are we doing? That's a really valuable tool from that point of view.
When you are the new person, in an ideal company culture, if you're trying to solve a problem or answer a question, and you've got people there who are new, what you should do is ask them first and say, listen, don't worry about it, just say what you think, because you're going to come at this from a totally different perspective. But what people end up doing is keeping quiet, getting to know the situation for a couple of months. You've lost all of that diversity.
You can't get that.
Collective intelligence, you need diversity. And you need the culture to be able to bring all of those different perspectives all together.
And create a new one, which shines light onto the whole subject.
Guys, we've been an hour and a half.
Oh,
I forgot you were there.
So before we move, finalise, I just want to say, who are you looking for? Who are the sort of people that would be useful for you?
So at the moment, we're finding that and over the last few months, we've brought this out. We've brought Endswarm out, and we've just been giving it to anyone who wants to try it. We found that it's gone into 3 different categories of users. The first being consultants, because they're going in and asking questions, and quite often going into teams with a little bit of that have these social pressures, because every team does. So consultants get it. The other is sort of internal innovation teams who are trying to transform, whether you call it digital transformation, innovation, or change. Any team that's trying to solve problems internally or answer questions internally. And the third is the social good. They're still trying to innovate, but they're trying to change something. So we are working with a council. So we've got a council, a police force, and local community groups, and they're trying to work together to see what the police should be doing and what the council should be spending money on, and they're trying to digitise that process. It's tricky at the moment, it's sort of a slow burn. We've got doctors on there, who a group of young GPs who are new in training, they did all their training together, but then they all dispersed out to different practices within their deanery, and they're asking each other questions where it's not sort of obvious. What are you thinking about this? And these are questions that they might feel marginally uncomfortable asking to the senior people that they've just turned up, so because they don't want to look stupid, but they're asking their peers, and then they're finding, oh no, I've been wondering about this as well, and well actually, what does the research show? There's not much research on this one particular area of medicine. Maybe someone should research it. Stuff like that is sort of bubbling out of people just being afraid to ask
The
questions.
implications. I mean, I was just thinking about student unions.
Ah, yeah.
You know, in education generally, in the social good. I mean, there's so many. You can see it going along.
What's your descriptor for N-Swarm?
From what perspective?
So if you say N-Swarm is not your vision, but if what does it say that it does when we present it to an
statement? What's the statement? Bang.
Yeah, so I would say it's a digital team intelligence platform. But
okay, I'm alright with that. So I get it. So okay, and then the outcome of that is what?
The outcome of that is better ideas faster, or better actions faster on the one side. So obviously there's a whole sort of time and money. If you're making better decisions faster, that's a very good thing. But on the other side, because we recognise people for what they, for the contributions that they made, they feel like they've had their voices heard. Because you're going to be making better decisions. It's much more likely that the team will be successful. There's a reduction in office politics, but then you'll get to this place where, because the team is much more likely to be successful after using our tool, that's really good for morale. The team actually becomes happier. And when you're actually doing really well together and you've overcome a challenge together, it bonds everyone together, and then you're in this virtuous cycle of
in any environment.
If more success,
if your team are valued, if they're listened to, it means your retention stays up.
Yeah.
People aren't going to leave and go elsewhere because they're having fun and they're enjoying
it. I imagine it's turning another piece of software into something that's regularly usable is probably the biggest resistance, right?
Well, you found it.
Yeah, well,
not another tool.
Oh no, I'm not. Because we've been down this road, right, a few times, and
But it's a perfect example of what a lot of people are like.
It's and it's like, to me, if you look, I know we use social media and it's a lot of but if there's something that's going to help you get what you want done and it works, it comes to the top, doesn't it? I mean, it always does. But I think this idea of making something your everyday go-to way of working is how are you supporting that process? I mean, because quite often what happens with software, in my experience, you get a link, go on it, have a go, and you kind of go, there's that initial kind of getting, it's like when you get a new phone, everything's in the different, if you've ever gone from, I don't know, Apple to whatever, it's all the opposite. So how do you overcome that? Do you support
That's kind of what we're learning at the moment. But what we think it is, because although our software works best actually to enable to activate introverts, it works best over a couple of days. Like if you're going to have a meeting where we would say, right, well, instead of just going to the meeting and thrashing out the ideas, put those same questions and some sub questions on N-Swarm first, let the introverts people work on it on a prep, and then use the analysis. And you might even at the beginning of the meeting want to let the extroverts dive in and do a final little bit on N-Swarm before you then switch it into analysis mode, and then use analysis mode to focus your meeting and make it quicker. What we're finding is that if you try and just introduce it to people one at a time and say, do it before this meeting, that doesn't really work the first few times. No. What you need to kind of almost do, like you guys the other day, you all sort of dived on at the same time, I think, or you did. Yeah, but you, within a couple of days, or even at the same time, like the first time you all jump on there, all sign on at the same time, you can bounce off each other and say, how are we doing this? What? And then you get that light bulb moment where you realise that all you really need to do it's a mind map. All you really need to do is learn how to rate for the value. Tag as an action. Only tag things as actions if it's genuinely going to be something that you think should be actioned. If people start tagging everything as an action, it just messes up the algorithms. Yeah. So, once they get that, and then they get a bit of a light bulb moment, and then they realise that it's actually something different, then we start seeing it works well. But people are tired of tech and new tech.
And so from my perspective, can I just say to anybody who's thinking of trying it out there, it is very user friendly. I mean, I don't do tech and I get frustrated by it, but and apart from switching it to analysis mode, which is an exciting thing I've still got to do, everything else was really useful, and it was just, even when you say you have to rate it, some people go, oh, I'm going, just slide a bar. And it's like, that's so easy. Everything was obvious. It really was.
Yeah.
So even you could have done it.
Even and on that note,
Yeah.
I want to thank you, Joe, for coming and this has probably been almost the longest one we've done.
Well, the newest and longest.
Yay!
Yeah.
So thank you very much.
Thank you very
Anything
much.
else you want to add? If people want to get in touch with
Thank
you,
you.
if people want to get in touch with you,
nswarm.com or me personally, joe.k@nswarm.com.
brilliant. I'll put all the links down below. Any last?
Check him out.
Any?
That's
Oh,
brilliant.
big news! We have a Be Inspired,
Yes.
first one for a long time, on the 12th of May at Brown's in central London on Butler's Wharf. For those who are interested, go to www.BeCollaboration.com events and you'll find the Be Inspired prices there. The programme is 269.
Yep.
And then the next programme after that is the 22nd of September.
Can you just remind me what time it starts and finishes? Because I can't remember.
Well, we asked people for you or for them.
For them.
Registration is 9:30. Programme starts at 10. We will be
So aim
there
for
early.
9 o'clock so that we can
Yeah,
register you in
yeah.
and we can get going at 10.
Yeah.
It finishes at
6:30.
6:30. Okay, thank you.
Brilliant, babe.
See you at the next one.
Okay, anything else?
I think that's it, really.
Love you. Bye.
Ta-ta.